What if the moment you've been waiting for, the one that finally makes sense of faith, purpose, and your place in the universe, was first whispered in America's darkest hour? Picture the Great Depression, jobs gone, families displaced, hope collapsing under the weight of empty pockets and shuttered doors. And yet, in that deep night of the soul, a quiet voice emerged. Edgar Cayce, offering not dogma but light, a secret teaching capable of shifting how humanity understands divine truth itself. Has this ever happened to you? You've searched sermons, turned pages of scripture, and still felt that restless tug inside, as if something essential was missing from traditional religion. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because Casey's message wasn't about adding more rules, it was about awakening what's already alive within you. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Now, back to the heart of it. Cayce called it a living current of spiritual awareness, what many today would describe as the spark of Christ consciousness, the quiet certainty that you are not separate from the source. He didn't dress it up as an elite mystical status reserved for saints. He presented it as a practical path for seekers who feel the ache for deeper meaning. Imagine hearing that during a time when people were losing everything, and yet gaining the one thing that cannot be taken: direct connection to the divine. Think about the courage it takes to admit that the outer forms haven't quenched your inner thirst. Maybe you've sat in a pew or on a meditation cushion, going through the motions, and still sensed that the living water was just beyond reach. Cayce's revelations, born in trance but aimed at our ordinary days, insisted that spiritual awakening is not a souvenir from sacred places. It's a shift in perception, an alignment of the heart, with a love that has always been present. Stay with me until the end, because the way this unfolds is not theoretical. It's a map for the moments when life feels most uncertain. Consider the symbolism of that era. The Great Depression as a mirror of spiritual bankruptcy, and yet right there, a door opens to inner wealth. Cayce's teaching suggests that divine truth is not a reward for perfect behavior, but a recognition of what's most real in you. In a world that measures value in coins and credentials, this is radical. It's the difference between chasing a distant heaven and discovering the sacred right where you stand. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because when seekers stop hunting for authority outside themselves, they often stumble into the authority of experience, presence, compassion, a felt oneness with God that outshines ritual. And if you've ever asked why sincere faith can still feel incomplete, Cayce's insight speaks directly to that ache. The missing piece isn't more belief, it's embodiment, not a new creed, but a new consciousness, one that reframes loss as initiation, fear as a doorway, and service as the most reliable path to inner power. Has this ever happened to you? A moment of quiet clarity in the middle of chaos, when you suddenly sense that love is the deeper law. That's the edge of the same teaching. Spiritual awakening woven into ordinary days, not apart from them. So let this introduction be a gentle unlearning. Set down the pressure to arrive and pick up the willingness to notice. The light that carried people through breadlines and dust storms is the same light available now, asking only for your attention. Stay with me until the end, because in the next moments we'll follow the thread from historical crisis to personal revelation, from the hunger that traditional forms couldn't feed to the inner table that never runs empty, until the pattern begins to reveal itself, and the door you've been pressing against quietly swings open. Before we dive deeper, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next revelations we share here. Each video is designed to bring you insights that can transform the way you see life and strengthen your own journey of awakening. Imagine the weight of 1932, factories silent, breadlines stretching for blocks, families clinging to scraps of hope. In the middle of this crushing despair, Edgar Cayce lay down, entered a trance, and began to speak of something that seemed impossible. A hidden truth that the greatest spiritual treasure wasn't locked away in churches or reserved for prophets. It was already pulsing inside every soul. This teaching didn't sound like distant mythology. It sounded like revelation, the the kind that could change the very mindset of humanity if only people were willing to listen. It shook the foundations of tradition, because what he described was not about earning divine favor through rituals or climbing a ladder of moral perfection. Instead, he revealed that the oneness with God, what he called Christ consciousness, was the natural destiny of the human journey. Think of the impact this had in a time when people were losing homes, dignity, and the sense of security they thought was permanent. Religion, as most knew it, offered ceremonies, sermons, and promises of reward after death. But behind the scenes, Cayce unveiled a far more immediate transformation. That divine awareness was not waiting in some future paradise, but present right here, in the middle of human struggle. He framed Christ consciousness as a living reality, a vibration of unity and love woven into the fabric of every individual. This was not just belief, it was becoming, not theory, but a pattern for daily life. The radical edge of his revelation was in its accessibility. No priest, no institution, no gatekeeper could monopolize it. If you pause and consider the depth of that claim, it flips centuries of religious authority on its head. Imagine hearing that the same awareness that moved through Jesus, the same force that healed the sick, that spoke with unshakable authority, that loved without condition, was not unreachable. It was the seed inside you, waiting to be awakened by your decisions, by your willingness to see beyond fear and separation. Cayce invited people to change their mindset entirely, to stop treating spirituality as something external and start seeing it as a personal, inner reality. In his words, the path wasn't about adding layers of doctrine but peeling them away, revealing the luminous center already within. The most extraordinary part was that this shift wasn't abstract. It had immediate consequences. To those drowning in despair, he offered a way to reframe suffering, not as punishment, but as an opportunity to activate deeper awareness. To those desperate for hope, he reminded them that the divine was not far away. It was closer than breath. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce wasn't merely describing a beautiful idea. He was pointing to a practical transformation, one that could be tested in the smallest moments of daily life. He explained that each choice, whether to forgive instead of resent, to love instead of withdraw, to serve without expectation, was more than moral behavior. It was the ignition of Christ consciousness itself. This was the hidden truth most people missed. Awakening wasn't about dramatic visions or supernatural signs. It was about how you respond, in the ordinary, behind the scenes of what looks like everyday life. Consider the profound impact of this. If divine consciousness isn't waiting at the end of years of striving, but ready to express itself now, then the way you handle each conversation, each challenge, each thought, becomes the very ground of your awakening. It means that even in moments of weakness, even in the shadows of despair, you're already standing at the threshold of transformation. What Cayce revealed was less about reaching a distant goal and more about remembering a forgotten truth, that humanity's spiritual destiny is not separation, but unity, not fear, but love. Write in the comments, "This makes sense to me." Put those words down if you feel that spark of recognition, because sometimes acknowledging it out loud is the very first step in bringing that hidden truth to life. When Cayce described Christ consciousness as the highest state a human being could reach, he wasn't placing it on a pedestal so far away that only saints could touch it. He was showing that Jesus embodied a living model of what each soul was meant to awaken into. This was not about worship from a distance, but about recognizing a pattern, a spiritual blueprint, already written inside every human heart. Imagine the shift in mindset that came from this realization. Instead of seeing divinity as something external and unreachable, people were confronted with the hidden truth that their own lives, their own decisions, their own acts of compassion and courage were the very soil in which that same awareness could bloom. Behind the scenes of history, in a small room in Virginia Beach, Cayce was quietly revolutionizing the way humanity understood its spiritual journey. It's easy to understand why religious leaders reacted with fear. Their authority rested on centuries of tradition, on rituals that made people believe the divine could only be accessed through them. Cayce disrupted that control by daring to say that no intermediary was required, that the same current of divine energy flowing through Jesus also moved through every soul. For the institutions, this was threatening, because it stripped away their monopoly over spiritual connection. But for seekers, for ordinary people who felt lost in a world of suffering, it was liberation. Suddenly, the burden of earning salvation through endless ceremonies was lifted. The focus shifted to inner transformation, to daily practice, to aligning with something already alive within. This democratization of divine power was nothing short of revolutionary. Imagine the impact of being told that God's presence was not contained in a temple, not locked in a book, not reserved for a chosen few, but pulsing in your own consciousness. That awareness changes everything. It means that the quiet decision to forgive someone who hurt you is no less sacred than a sermon from the pulpit. It means that your willingness to act with love in the middle of hardship is as holy as any ritual performed in a cathedral. This is the hidden truth Cayce uncovered, that the divine is not distant, but immediate, woven into the smallest choices of daily life. The journey he invited people into was not about escape, but about embodiment. Christ consciousness wasn't a mystical dream. It was a way of being that had real impact. It asked, how do you respond when you are wronged? How do you act when life pushes you into fear? Do you cling to separation and resentment, or do you risk love, compassion, and service? Every one of those decisions shapes whether the light within you is dimmed or allowed to shine. This is why Cayce's message carried such weight. He wasn't just giving people a philosophy. He was offering a transformation of mindset that had the power to turn despair into dignity and routine moments into sacred encounters. Think of the liberation that comes when you stop waiting for divine approval and start living as though it has already been given. The impact of that shift cannot be overstated. It reframes suffering not as punishment, but as invitation. It turns ordinary life into sacred ground, and it reveals that spiritual awakening is not about climbing out of humanity, but about stepping fully into it, with a consciousness that sees unity where others see division. Cayce was, in essence, pulling back the veil and saying, look, the very power you thought was reserved for a chosen few is alive in you right now. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because what Cayce revealed about how this inner awakening actually works in practice uncovers something even more extraordinary. He explained that the divine energy isn't passive. It responds to your decisions, your mindset, your willingness to embody love over fear. It's not about performing for an outside judge. It's about activating the law already written in your being. And once you begin to see that, even the smallest act of kindness becomes a doorway into the infinite. Write in the comments, I'm also on this path. Put those words down if you feel the resonance of this truth stirring inside, because acknowledging it is the first step toward letting that hidden light move more freely in your own life. Cayce made it clear that Christ consciousness was not some abstract philosophy to be admired from a distance, but a living current meant to be woven into the fabric of everyday life. He insisted that this awareness was practical, accessible, and deeply transformative, capable of reshaping the way people approached even the most ordinary experiences. Imagine the impact of hearing in a time of widespread despair that divinity wasn't far away or locked behind ceremony. It was already alive inside you, waiting to be activated through the choices you make. The hidden truth he revealed was that spirituality was not confined to sacred spaces or lofty ideals, but expressed in the way you treat others, in how you respond to challenges, and in the mindset you carry through each day. This was the revolution of perspective that Cayce offered. Awakening was not about escape, but about embodiment. When he spoke of the divine energy that flowed through Jesus, he wasn't describing it as something unique or unattainable. Instead, he pointed out that the very same current, the force that healed the sick, comforted the broken, and radiated love so powerful it shifted entire crowds, also resides in you. That idea alone was enough to redefine human potential, because it shattered the illusion of limitation. Behind the scenes of what many thought was a story of one extraordinary life, Cayce uncovered a universal pattern. Jesus did not live as an exception, but as an example. His miracles were not meant to prove superiority, but to demonstrate what becomes possible when human consciousness aligns completely with divine will. This insight dismantled centuries of conditioning. Generations had been taught to see Jesus as unreachable, as a figure whose perfection highlighted their own inadequacy. Cayce reversed that narrative entirely. He said that Jesus was not showing off divine privilege, but revealing the blueprint of human destiny. The difference is enormous. Instead of pushing people into passive admiration, it invited them into active transformation. It reframed Jesus's life as a map, one that every soul could follow, not by imitating rituals, but by embodying the same spirit of compassion, forgiveness, and unconditional love in daily decisions. The mindset shift this produced was profound. To see Jesus not as a distant icon but as a model meant that spiritual growth was not reserved for the few, it was the natural path for all. Suddenly, the small choices, whether to forgive a slight, whether to extend kindness when it's least deserved, whether to act with integrity when no one is watching, took on infinite significance. They were no longer just moral actions but moments of awakening, opportunities to ignite the same consciousness that made the seemingly impossible possible. This was the hidden truth Cayce insisted people had overlooked. Divine potential is not awakened by waiting for a miracle, but by living as if you already carry the power of one. Think of the transformation this understanding creates. It removes the pressure to chase spirituality through endless searching, and instead redirects attention inward, toward what has always been there. It lifts the weight of believing you are too flawed, too ordinary, too far from God. It offers the perspective that each breath, each thought, each decision is a canvas on which Christ consciousness can be expressed. Behind the scenes of ordinary life, something extraordinary is always waiting for permission to move through you. And in that realization, the distance between the sacred and the mundane dissolves. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce didn't just stop at telling people they carried divine energy. He explained how that energy responds directly to intention, how it awakens not in dramatic moments of spectacle, but in the quiet consistency of love in action. This was more than a teaching. It was a call to practice a new way of living, to discover through experience that what seemed unreachable was already present. Write in the comments, "This awakens something in me." Put those words down if this truth resonates within you, because declaring it helps bring that inner recognition from thought into living awareness. What made Cayce's words so unsettling for some and so liberating for others was the way he reframed the life of Jesus. He wasn't presenting him as a distant figure, isolated by perfection, but as a mirror of humanity's highest potential. Jesus, in this understanding, wasn't demonstrating an unreachable uniqueness. He was showing what it looks like when the divine within is fully awakened. The impact of this hidden truth is extraordinary. It takes the weight off our shoulders of having to strive for something beyond human reach, and instead reveals that the very fabric of our being is already woven with the same essence. The real question is not whether we carry this potential, but whether we allow it to come alive in the decisions we make each day. Cayce emphasized that the Christ within is not symbolic or poetic language, but a literal presence. This inner consciousness is not dormant because it doesn't exist. It is dormant because we fail to activate it, and activation doesn't require mystical visions or complex rituals. It requires something much simpler, yet infinitely more powerful: the conscious direction of our daily mindset. Every decision has impact. Each time you respond with compassion instead of judgment, you are not only improving a situation, but awakening a dimension of awareness that transforms you from the inside out. This is where the journey of transformation truly begins, behind the scenes of ordinary life, where the most extraordinary shifts are born. Forgiveness, love, and service became the key practices Cayce highlighted, and he insisted that these weren't just moral virtues. They were technologies of consciousness. When you choose forgiveness, you are not excusing harmful behavior. You are breaking the chain that binds your awareness to resentment. When you choose love, especially in the face of indifference or hostility, you are not being naive. You are aligning your energy with the universal field of unity. And when you serve others, without expectation, You are not simply performing a good deed. You are dissolving the ego's grip and allowing the Christ within to express itself fully. In this way, what the world calls small acts of kindness become portals to divine reality. Think of the mindset shift this requires. Most people are trained to believe that spiritual power is reserved for dramatic moments or extraordinary figures. Cayce shattered this conditioning by showing that the doorway to awakening is built from ordinary decisions: holding the door for a stranger, forgiving a betrayal, comforting someone in silence. These are not trivial gestures. They are activations of Christ consciousness. They are the practical expression of what Jesus demonstrated so vividly. And once you realize this hidden truth, every moment of your life becomes sacred ground. Nothing is wasted. No choice is insignificant. This teaching carried an undeniable impact. For those who felt spiritually powerless, it redefined their journey. Instead of waiting for divine approval, they could begin living from divine presence. Instead of seeing spirituality as something external, they could embody it here and now. And in doing so, they discovered that awakening was not about escaping the world but about transforming it, one decision, one thought, one act at a time. This is the journey Cayce described, the daily unfolding of potential until the Christ within becomes not just a concept but a living reality. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce's vision of how this inner awakening reshapes not only individual lives, but the collective human experience, reveals something profound about the evolution of consciousness. He suggested that as more people embody these choices, the field of awareness itself begins to shift, altering the way society functions and even the trajectory of humanity's future. Write in the comments, "I choose love in action." Place those words, if you feel the resonance of this truth, because naming it out loud helps anchor the mindset that every act of kindness is more than a gesture. It's a spark of awakening. Awakening, as Cayce described it, was never about waiting for some distant moment when life finally aligned or when a reward might be handed out after death. It was about recognizing what was already within, hidden beneath the noise of fear and doubt, waiting to be acknowledged. This was not a promise of some future paradise, but an invitation to uncover the sacred presence already breathing in each moment. The transformation began not by adding something new, but by unveiling what had always been there, and that simple shift in mindset had the power to turn despair into clarity, confusion into purpose, and emptiness into fullness. During the bleakness of the Depression, when countless families felt abandoned by systems that promised stability, Cayce's revelations carried a weight unlike any sermon or speech. People didn't need more empty words. They needed something that worked. Behind the scenes of economic collapse and social despair, he reminded them of a hidden truth, that the deepest hope does not come from the outside world, but from awakening the divine spark within. This wasn't a vague comfort. It was a source of real strength, a living current that could carry them through the darkest hours. Those who listened found more than encouragement. They found transformation. Families who came to him in desperation reported not only a sense of peace but actual healing, both emotional and physical. They experienced guidance that cut through confusion, clarity that illuminated decisions, and renewal that reshaped relationships. These outcomes weren't abstract ideals. They were evidence that Christ consciousness, when acknowledged and embodied, had practical impact. It reached into the daily struggles of life and changed them from the inside out. This is what made Cayce's message so radically different. He didn't position spiritual awakening as an escape from hardship, but as the power to face hardship with new eyes. His teachings didn't create distance from reality. They transformed how people moved through it. And in that transformation lay the true miracle, the realization that peace, strength, and clarity could exist even when the world around you was falling apart. Spirituality stopped being about endurance alone and became about evolution, about becoming someone who could navigate suffering with love and see opportunities for growth even in pain. The hidden truth behind this was that awakening didn't require extraordinary talent or years of specialized training. It simply asked for recognition, for a conscious decision to align with what had always been present. This decision was not a one-time choice but a daily practice, one that grew stronger with each act of forgiveness, each gesture of compassion, each willingness to trust in something greater than fear. Behind the scenes of these ordinary acts, something extraordinary was happening. Consciousness itself was being reshaped. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce explained that the very same energy people witnessed in Jesus' life could begin flowing into theirs the moment they stopped seeing it as distant and started claiming it as their own. This was not imitation, it was embodiment. The impact of such a perspective is immense, because it means that spiritual power is not conditional on circumstances. It is conditional only on awareness. And when awareness shifts, so too does the entire experience of reality. Write in the comments, "I recognize this within me." Place those words if you feel the truth stirring, because naming it helps move this awareness from an idea into a lived reality, anchoring the hidden light that is already yours. Cayce's words carried a radical shift for anyone willing to listen. Christ consciousness was never about performing the right rituals or repeating the right prayers. In perfect sequence, it was about aligning with the divine laws already written into the heart, laws that spoke through compassion, integrity, forgiveness, and love. This meant that spiritual awakening could no longer be measured by external ceremonies or by the approval of institutions. It became an internal journey, one that each person had to recognize and cultivate from within, and the impact of that realization was enormous because it gave people back their power, no longer dependent on systems or authorities to validate their faith. They could now see that the spark of divinity lived inside them, waiting only for acknowledgement. When the storms of war broke over the world, this message became even more vital. Families torn apart by fear and uncertainty needed something more than speeches or slogans. Cayce encouraged them to practice what he called the presence of Christ, a way of carrying inner awareness into every breath and every thought. Meditation, in his teaching, became the gateway, not an escape from reality, not a withdrawal from responsibility, but a way to tune into a deeper frequency that offered strength when everything external was crumbling. In the middle of global chaos, when nations were divided and futures felt uncertain, this practice allowed individuals to discover peace that nothing outside could shatter. Behind the scenes of history, while the headlines screamed of battles and loss, countless people quietly found stability through this inner practice. Mothers waiting for news of their sons, fathers grappling with rationing and responsibility, children sensing fear in the air, all were able to touch a stillness that reassured them they were not alone. Meditation was no longer a mystical activity reserved for monks or ascetics. It became a lifeline, a way to hold on to clarity and hope when the world seemed swallowed by darkness. This was the hidden truth Cayce revealed, that true transformation begins in consciousness, and from that center radiates outward to influence how we respond to life's trials. The power of this teaching lies in its practicality. When you meditate with sincerity, you aren't escaping the world, you're entering it more fully, but with a different mindset. You're able to look at crisis without being consumed by it, to hear fear without letting it dictate your choices, to feel pain without losing sight of the love that underlies existence itself. That shift in perception is the real miracle. It doesn't erase difficulty, but it changes how difficulty shapes you. Instead of being broken by struggle, you are refined by it. Instead of collapsing under the weight of uncertainty, you rise with a strength that feels as though it comes from beyond yourself. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce's vision of meditation as tuning into divine awareness was not only about personal calm. He described it as connecting with a universal field, the very frequency that Jesus himself embodied, and in doing so, each individual act of stillness became more than private relief. It became a contribution to the larger consciousness of humanity. The hidden truth is that when one person aligns with love, clarity, and unity, the impact ripples outward, influencing more than just their own journey. Write in the comments, "Peace begins within me." Place those words if you sense how real this truth is, because affirming it out loud helps anchor the awareness that the presence of Christ is not distant, It's alive in your own inner silence. Cayce never disguised the fact that awakening demanded effort. It wasn't about waiting for some divine lightning bolt to strike, nor was it about clutching to abstract beliefs. He described it as a daily practice, a rhythm of humility and service, woven into the smallest details of life. The hidden truth, he said, is that the grand transformations we long for are born in the ordinary. Every decision carries weight. Choosing love instead of bitterness, patience instead of anger, generosity instead of self-interest. These seemingly small decisions carve the path toward Christ consciousness. They aren't just moral preferences. They are acts of alignment, ways of tuning your soul to the frequency of the divine. Behind the scenes of an average day, in traffic jams, conversations, and quiet moments at home, the awakening either strengthens or withers, depending on the choices you make. But Cayce didn't stop at the present moment. He widened the perspective and spoke of reincarnation not as fantasy, but as the unfolding of a larger journey. According to him, the soul evolves through many lifetimes, each experience designed to shape growth toward awareness of unity with God. This teaching reframed struggles, relationships, and even losses in a completely new light. Instead of random chaos, life became a carefully woven tapestry of lessons. Every joy, every setback, every connection was purposeful, nudging the soul closer to divine recognition. This insight brought profound comfort to those who couldn't understand why their lives carried so much pain. Cayce explained that nothing was wasted. Even the wounds carried meaning, shaping a higher capacity for compassion and awakening. The impact of this revelation was staggering. People who once saw themselves as victims of chance began to recognize their lives as part of an evolutionary process. Instead of asking, "Why me?" they began to ask, "What is this teaching me?" That shift in mindset turned despair into opportunity, resentment into understanding, and fear into trust. Behind the scenes of everyday hardship, something extraordinary was happening. The soul was evolving, being refined, and prepared for higher states of consciousness. And within this vast perspective, Jesus emerged not as an isolated miracle worker, but as the culmination of the entire human journey. Cayce described Jesus as the final stage of evolution, the living embodiment of unity, love, and divine awareness. He didn't represent an unattainable exception, but humanity's destiny fully realized. Every word he spoke, every act of compassion, every moment of selfless service was a demonstration of what it means to live completely aligned with the Christ within. To Cayce, Jesus was the proof that the human story is not one of endless separation, but of eventual reunion. He was the evidence of what is possible when the soul completes its journey of transformation and returns to full awareness of its divine essence. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce's framing of Jesus as the embodiment of humanity's destiny wasn't meant to inspire distant admiration. It was an urgent reminder that each soul is on the same trajectory. Every lifetime, every challenge, every decision is a step along this shared path. The hidden truth is that the same divine potential that lived fully in Jesus is quietly alive in you, waiting for recognition, expression, and embodiment. And when you begin to see yourself not as separate from that destiny, but as part of it, every moment of your journey takes on sacred significance. Write in the comments, "I see the journey in my life." Place those words if this perspective resonates with you, because naming it helps anchor the awareness that your experiences are not random. They are the stepping stones of your soul's evolution. Cayce was clear when he said that life's ultimate purpose wasn't tied to wealth, recognition, or even physical well-being. All those things, while meaningful in their own place, remain temporary. The deeper calling of every soul is the awakening of Christ consciousness, that state of union with the divine that Jesus embodied and revealed. This hidden truth reframes the entire human journey. Instead of chasing external achievements, it invites us to look inward, to measure success not by accumulation, but by alignment. The impact of this shift is immense, because it redirects attention from fleeting pursuits to what endures beyond time, the unfolding of divine awareness within. Yet Cayce also pointed out that most people struggle to access this awareness because of three persistent obstacles: selfishness, fear, and materialism. He didn't present these as moral failures to weigh us down with guilt, but as energetic patterns that interfere with the light of the soul. Think of them like clouds passing across the sun. The radiance is still there, but it feels hidden, dulled by habits and mindsets that keep us bound to separation. Selfishness convinces us that life is a competition for survival, where others must lose for us to win. Fear narrows our vision, making us shrink from love and cling to safety. Materialism persuades us that fulfillment lies outside ourselves, in possessions or status, distracting us from the treasure already within. Cayce's genius was in showing that these patterns are not permanent walls but illusions that can be dissolved. He insisted that transformation happens not through suppression or denial, but through replacement. Every time selfishness arises, we are given the chance to choose service, to expand our awareness beyond the self. When fear surfaces, we can turn toward trust and love, seeing that life is larger than the momentary threat. And when material obsession tempts us to measure worth in what can be bought, we can return to the recognition that the most precious realities, compassion, unity, forgiveness, cannot be purchased at all. Behind the scenes of daily life, every decision to replace these patterns becomes an act of liberation, a reclaiming of the light that was never truly lost. This is the journey Cayce described. Not a one-time revelation, but a continual process of exchanging illusions for truth, shadows for light, fear for love. The hidden truth is that these obstacles are not enemies to fight against, but teachers that reveal where we are not yet free. They show us the precise places where transformation is waiting. And in that realization, even our struggles become meaningful, because they point us back to the choices that awaken the Christ within. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce's explanation of these energetic patterns reveals something profound about the nature of consciousness itself. He described them not as static conditions, but as frequencies, states of mind that attract experiences matching their vibration. When we operate from selfishness, we draw more separation into our lives. When fear dominates, we encounter circumstances that reinforce anxiety. And when materialism rules our hearts, satisfaction always slips just out of reach. The great revelation is that shifting these frequencies through love, service, and trust doesn't only change our inner state, it changes the reality we experience. In other words, awakening Christ consciousness isn't just about personal peace, it transforms the very world we live in. Write in the comments, "I release fear and choose love." Put those words down if this message resonates with you, because affirming it aloud helps anchor the decision to dissolve the old patterns and step into the hidden truth of your own divine awareness. Cayce broke through centuries of conditioning when he insisted that salvation was never about belief alone. Belief might be the doorway, but stepping through it requires becoming, an actual transformation of the heart and mind. The hidden truth he uncovered is that spirituality cannot be reduced to doctrines memorized or creeds repeated. It must be lived, felt, and embodied in the fabric of daily existence. This redefined faith not as intellectual agreement, but as an inner revolution, one that reshapes how we perceive ourselves, others, and the world around us. The impact of this teaching was profound, because it freed people from the weight of feeling that salvation depended on following rules perfectly, and instead invited them to align with a love that transforms everything it touches. The shift Cayce pointed to was subtle, yet revolutionary. The goal is not to merely think about God, but to embody divine love moment by moment. This requires more than reverence in sacred spaces. It demands compassion in ordinary interactions, patience in moments of conflict, and forgiveness in situations where resentment feels easier. It's in those hidden corners of life that the true practice unfolds. Religion, in this light, becomes practice, not theory. No longer is spirituality a matter of quoting scripture or attending ceremonies. It becomes a living expression that radiates through one's choices and presence. Behind the scenes of everyday life, each decision to embody love becomes a sacred act, a microcosm of transformation that shapes both the individual and the collective. Perhaps the most liberating revelation Cayce offered was that Christ consciousness is universal. It is not bound to one faith, culture, or tradition, but accessible to any soul willing to align with its laws. He emphasized that divine awareness responds not to labels or affiliations, but to sincerity, love, and service. This perspective broke down barriers that had divided humanity for centuries. It suggested that a Christian, a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Jew, or someone with no formal religion at all could awaken the same inner presence through the same practices of compassion, forgiveness, and alignment with truth. The universality of this teaching was both humbling and empowering because it reminded people that the divine spark is not owned or controlled by institutions. It belongs to all of humanity. This shift in perspective changes everything. When you stop seeing spirituality as exclusive and start seeing it as inclusive, the walls between people begin to dissolve. Prejudice gives way to compassion, competition softens into cooperation, and fear of difference transforms into recognition of unity. The journey, then, is not about converting others to a system, but about embodying a consciousness that naturally transcends systems. It is about recognizing the same light in another that you are learning to awaken in yourself. This recognition doesn't make faith less personal. It makes it more powerful, because it roots it in shared humanity. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce's vision of a universal Christ consciousness wasn't meant to erase traditions, but to reveal the hidden truth they all point toward. He explained that the spiritual laws of love, service, and forgiveness operate universally. Like gravity, they affect every soul regardless of belief. This means that every act of kindness is an act of alignment. Every moment of forgiveness is a step toward awakening. Every decision to serve is a direct participation in divine reality. And when enough individuals begin to embody these truths, the collective consciousness of humanity itself begins to shift toward unity. Write in the comments, "Love is my daily practice." Place those words if this resonates with you, because affirming it helps to anchor the mindset that true spirituality is not confined to thought, but lived through action, turning everyday life into sacred ground. Cayce understood that lofty ideas, if they remain abstract, rarely change lives. That is why he offered practical methods, prayer, meditation, forgiveness, and service, as the daily tools for awakening Christ consciousness. He explained that these weren't meant to be heavy obligations or distant ideals, but simple actions that any person, regardless of background, could practice. Prayer became less about reciting memorized words and more about aligning the heart with divine will. Meditation was no longer framed as withdrawal from life, but as tuning into the deeper rhythm of awareness that sustains everything. Forgiveness was not a passive act of forgetting, but a conscious decision to release the energetic weight of resentment. And service, perhaps the most powerful of all, was the practice of stepping outside of self-interest to embody love in action. Behind the scenes of these seemingly ordinary disciplines, something extraordinary was happening. The divine spark within was being fanned into flame. One of the most striking examples Cayce shared was that of a businessman who came to him devastated during the Great Depression. He was desperate, asking for predictions about whether his financial situation would improve. But, instead of offering forecasts about the markets, Cayce pointed him inward. He explained that true wealth was spiritual, that abundance begins by awakening the Christ within, rather than chasing external conditions. At first, the man was disappointed, even frustrated, because he had come seeking reassurance about money. Yet as he began applying the practices Cayce recommended, daily prayer, meditation, and acts of service, something unexpected happened. His mindset shifted, his relationships healed, his sense of purpose deepened, and eventually, his external situation improved as well, but not because the economy changed overnight. It was because he himself had been transformed from within, and that inner change reshaped the way he engaged with the world. His story became a living testimony to the hidden truth that spiritual awakening is not only about inner peace, but about reordering life at every level. Cayce reminded people again and again that individual awakening never stops at the personal. Every soul that chooses to live from love and alignment contributes to the collective evolution of humanity. He described consciousness as a shared field, one where each decision, each act of forgiveness, each moment of prayer sends ripples outward. This means that your transformation is not only your own, it becomes part of a larger journey that raises the vibration of the entire human family. Behind the scenes of history, the real impact of spiritual practice is not seen only in private lives, but in the slow, steady elevation of collective awareness. Think about what this perspective means. It turns every act of kindness into something much larger than itself. When you choose compassion over judgment, you are not just changing one interaction, you are subtly shifting the atmosphere of human consciousness. When you forgive, you are not only freeing yourself but making it easier for others to move toward unity. When you meditate, you are not only quieting your own mind but adding clarity to the collective field of awareness we all share. This was Cayce's vision, a humanity that evolves not only through dramatic events but through countless quiet decisions that awaken the Christ within and extend its influence outward. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because Cayce suggested that this collective awakening is not optional, it is the hidden purpose behind human existence itself. Each life, each challenge, each relationship plays a role in preparing the soul to contribute to this greater transformation. And when enough individuals begin to embody Christ consciousness, the impact is not just personal, it becomes global, shaping the destiny of humanity in ways that go far beyond what we can yet imagine. Write in the comments, "I am part of this awakening." Place those words if this truth resonates with you, because affirming it helps anchor the awareness that your personal journey is woven into the collective evolution of all. Cayce revealed something both simple and staggering. Every single thought contributes to the collective field of human consciousness. He compared it to a current running through all of life, a shared atmosphere of spirit that each of us helps to shape. When thoughts are guided by love, unity, and compassion, they expand Christ consciousness, making its presence stronger not only in our own lives, but in the world around us. But when thoughts are saturated with fear, selfishness, or resentment, that same field contracts, dimming the awareness of divine truth. This hidden truth reframes the weight of inner life. It shows that what happens in the privacy of your own mind carries an impact far greater than you imagine. Behind the scenes of reality, thought itself becomes creation, sending ripples into the collective experience of humanity. This is why Cayce placed so much emphasis on meditation, describing it as a way of tuning into God's frequency. He explained that meditation is not about escaping the noise of life but about entering into the deeper current that prophets and saints once accessed. In silence, the restless chatter of the mind quiets, and the inner ear opens to divine guidance. It is in this state that intuition sharpens, clarity emerges, and strength renews. The impact of such practice is profound, because it connects you not just with peace, but with the same stream of awareness that guided the greatest teachers and healers in history. Meditation becomes less about withdrawing from the world and more about re-entering it with alignment, carrying wisdom and strength into every decision. The practical effects of this were seen vividly during times of war. Families who turned to prayer and meditation reported tangible experiences that defied logic. Mothers described sudden peace while their sons were fighting abroad. Fathers spoke of clarity in decision-making despite overwhelming uncertainty. Some even recounted moments of knowing their loved ones were safe before any official word arrived. These were not isolated accounts but a pattern, suggesting that spiritual practice was not confined to inner comfort, but carried influence across time and distance. Behind the scenes of conflict and fear, a deeper current was at work, one that transcended the limits of physical space. The hidden truth Cayce emphasized is that prayer and meditation don't just alter the one who practices them, they alter the field of reality itself. When aligned with love and sincerity, they generate an energy that others can feel even if they are miles away. This was more than wishful thinking. It was a demonstration of the interconnectedness of all life. And once you see life through this lens, It changes how you approach everything. Thoughts are no longer private, they are contributions. Silence is no longer empty, it is filled with divine presence. And spiritual practice is no longer optional, it becomes the most powerful form of participation in the journey of humanity. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce's vision of how individual practice influences collective evolution leads to a profound responsibility. If every thought, every prayer, every moment of alignment contributes to the shaping of the world, then each of us is not merely a bystander in history, but a co-creator. And that realization changes everything about the way we understand transformation, both personal and collective. Write in the comments, "My thoughts carry light." Place those words if this resonates with you, because affirming it anchors the awareness that your inner life is not small or invisible. It has impact that stretches far beyond what you can see. Cayce reminded us of a truth that is as unsettling as it is liberating. The kingdom of God is not somewhere far away or hidden in a future reward. It is already here, within, available in this very moment. This changes everything, because it means that heaven is not a distant destination, but a state of consciousness you can embody right now. Each decision, no matter how small, becomes a crossroads where you either align with unity and love or fall back into separation and fear. Life, then, is not a waiting room for eternity. It is the workshop where divine awareness is either activated or ignored. Behind the scenes of ordinary days, the sacred is constantly offering itself to us in the form of choices, and the impact of those decisions accumulates into the life we create and the consciousness we embody. But Cayce also issued a warning. Humanity's greatest danger is not war, poverty, or natural disasters. The real danger is forgetting this truth. When we live unconscious of the divine spark within, we allow fear, hatred, and division to dominate the collective experience. He described this as a battle not fought on distant battlefields, but in the quiet interior of every human heart. Consciousness versus unconsciousness, love versus fear, unity versus separation. This is the hidden conflict shaping the destiny of humanity. And what makes it so profound is that the outcome is not determined by a handful of leaders or by historical events, but by the countless decisions of ordinary individuals, choosing whether to remember or forget their true nature. Even suffering, in Cayce's vision, takes on a deeper role. He explained that challenges, hardships, and losses are not meaningless accidents or punishments, but purposeful experiences designed to awaken the soul. Each trial is like a mirror, reflecting where we still cling to fear or control, and offering us the chance to release those illusions. Pain becomes the teacher that refines compassion. Struggle becomes the fire that strengthens faith. Loss becomes the doorway that opens us to a love not dependent on circumstances. This perspective transforms suffering from something to be avoided at all costs into something that accelerates growth when faced with courage and humility. It does not glorify pain, but it reveals its hidden purpose as part of the soul's evolution. Think of how this changes the way you view your own journey. Instead of asking why difficulties arise, you begin to ask what they are revealing. Instead of resenting trials, you start to see them as opportunities for awakening. The impact of this shift is extraordinary because it allows you to meet life with curiosity instead of resistance. Behind the scenes of hardship, the soul is being shaped for something greater, prepared to embody the same unity and love that Jesus demonstrated as the final stage of human evolution. This is the hidden truth that gives meaning to even the darkest nights of the soul. Nothing is wasted, and every experience is part of a greater unfolding. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because Cayce's view of suffering as purposeful opens a door to one of his most powerful revelations. The idea that Jesus' life was not meant to remove suffering from existence, but to transform how we experience it. His example showed that pain, betrayal, and loss can all be met with love so complete that they become instruments of awakening rather than chains of despair. This was not theory for Cayce. It was the very pattern of transformation that every soul is invited to follow. Write in the comments, "I see purpose in my trials." Place those words if this resonates with you, because affirming it aloud helps shift the mindset from resistance to recognition, turning difficulties into stepping stones on the journey of awakening. Cayce often reminded people that the human body was never separate from the soul, and that true healing required more than medical intervention. He explained that when the spirit is misaligned, when fear, resentment, or material obsession dominate, the body reflects this disharmony in the form of illness. But when the soul reconnects to its source through prayer, meditation, forgiveness, and service, something extraordinary happens. The body begins to respond. Symptoms: ease, energy returns, clarity emerges. This is not to deny the importance of medicine, but to reveal the hidden truth behind health itself, that physical wellness flows naturally from spiritual wholeness. Christ consciousness, in this sense, is not just a lofty state of awareness. It is the missing link that restores balance in every aspect of life. Behind the scenes of what appears to be a purely biological process, the deeper currents of spirit are always at work. The testimonies of those who lived through Cayce's guidance carried remarkable impact. People who came with ailments that no doctor could resolve often discovered improvement when they began to align their thoughts, emotions, and actions with love and higher purpose. For Cayce, this was not superstition. It was evidence of the inseparable unity of body, mind, and spirit. Healing was never only about removing pain. It was about transforming consciousness so that the physical reflected the inner light. And the more individuals awakened to this reality, the more they realized that wholeness was not something given from the outside, but awakened from within. From this foundation, Cayce painted a vision that stretched far beyond individual healing. He foresaw a time when enough souls, awakened to Christ consciousness, would collectively shift humanity into a new era of unity. This was not utopian fantasy, but a natural outcome of spiritual evolution. As more people embodied love instead of fear, service instead of selfishness, and compassion instead of judgment, the collective field of consciousness would change. Wars, divisions, and inequalities that once seemed inevitable would lose their power, replaced by cooperation and respect, born from the recognition of our shared divine essence. He described this coming transformation as the fulfillment of humanity's destiny, a society no longer governed by fear-driven systems, but guided by the presence of divine love in action. The hidden truth he revealed is that this future is not waiting for us in some distant age. It begins now, with the decisions each person makes in their own lives. Every moment of forgiveness plants a seed for global peace. Every act of compassion adds weight to the collective scale of unity. Every choice to embody Christ consciousness contributes to the unfolding of a new world. Behind the scenes of our current struggles, the potential for this transformation is already alive. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic, because Cayce's vision of a new era wasn't just a prophecy, it was a call to responsibility. He reminded people that the awakening of humanity depends on the awakening of individuals. The collective journey is made of countless personal journeys, each one carrying the potential to tip the balance toward love. And when enough souls begin to live this truth, the momentum becomes unstoppable, carrying humanity into the very destiny for which it was created. Write in the comments, "I am ready for unity." Place those words if this vision resonates with you, because affirming it helps anchor the awareness that your personal transformation is part of the greater journey toward a world guided by divine love. If you've stayed with me all the way here, it probably means something in this message spoke directly to you. That's why I'd love for you to subscribe, so you don't miss the kind of insights that keep deepening and unfolding each time we meet here. And if you reach the end, let me know in the comments by writing, "This message was meant for me." It's a beautiful way to mark that you walked through the whole journey. A simple like on this video also helps carry this conversation further, connecting us in ways that go beyond the screen. And if you're ready to keep exploring, there's a video right here that complements everything we've been uncovering. Click and continue with me over there.